Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Welcome to this week's topic. And the name of the topic this week is Red Flags and Stolen Cheese. But we will not be talking about stolen cheese very much. We'll be talking about red flags and what happens when you're not taking a red flag as a sign to, maybe just stop and consider what you're dealing with. And I was writing about that this week because when you grow up in a chaotic environment, definitely households where, that's an alcoholic family system, but any kind of chaos where you're not really sure what might happen from day to day. Maybe you're dealing with a parent who has a flash temper or any sort of like regular uncertainty where you as a child are growing up feeling like you're walking on eggshells. You need to be on high alert all the time. You're not safe. Then red flags become just another day. It's not, they're not really red flags for you anymore. They're just like a Tuesday. And so what happens when you are sort of marinating in that kind of dynamic for your whole childhood and you head out into the world and start forming your own friendships and relationships and red flags happen, you're not responding to them in the same way that somebody might who grew up with more secure attachment, more stable home environment. You're used to chaos, you're used to uncertainty, you're used to explosions, and so you've learned how to cope with that, but maybe not in the best way. And sometimes those coping mechanisms that helped us survive childhood are things that we need to take a look at, examine, and sometimes really overcome, work through, find a different way when we get older. And that was certainly the case for me. And I was talking about this particular example of a relationship that I was in when I moved to Los Angeles in 2001. But this is just one example of finding myself in a situation that, exploded and realizing like there were so many red flags that I had not walked past. It's not like I didn't see them or know that there was an issue. It's that I just chose to keep going. So, and that happened again and again and again. It was not a one-time experience for me. And I think for most people who grow up in that sort of chaos, it's pretty typical. And in that example that I was using in the personal essay this week, it's definitely one of the crazier relationships I was ever in. I was with someone and moved across the country with this person, and this is not a bad person either. Really so many wonderful qualities, but a lot of things happening under the surface that I was feeling, and definitely there were events that happened along the way where I really did stop in my tracks, but then I just picked up the pace and continued. And so this is definitely related to any idea that you might have that you can save anyone. I think a lot of people, move into relationships, and the first few months of most relationships, right, they're great. First few months are great. It's like just hormones and fun and all that stuff. And then when the kind of like lust dust clears, you see what you're what you're dealing with, right? Life continues, things move along, and you start to really get to understand this person on a deeper level. It takes a lot of time to really get to know somebody. And so when things arise, if you have this background of, disorganized attachment, not knowing from day to day whether you're going to be received with love or you're going to be received, in a terrifying way, you're primed for that. You understand that, right? That feels like home to you. And I was saying that in the essay that, it's sometimes shocking later when you realize not only was I dealing with these red flags, I was sort of moving toward them because that felt like home. I understood that. I knew what my role was then in that relationship, right? My role is to help, to fix, to save, to make it okay. And most of my relationships were that. And so if that speaks to you, it's really something to take a look at, because it's not going to lead to a thriving, healthy, happy relationship where you feel seen, heard, understood, cherished, celebrated. Like, none of those things are going to happen, because the whole driving force of the thing is you helping, saving, trying to figure out, if I could just love this person enough, then they'll heal and it'll be great. Being in love with someone's potential, this could be amazing if only. And sometimes that if only is like, if only this person could be a whole different person, and so just to really kind of hit the pause button on that and step back. And what happened after this relationship, so I moved 3,000 miles away with this person I had known for 6 months, and it was not the plan. My original plan was to move by myself and just kind of forge a new start, a new beginning, really set myself up in a different state where I didn't know anyone and begin a new life. And part of my impetus to do that, I was 29 when I moved here, when I moved to LA, was that I really knew on a gut level that in order to separate myself from the chaos of my mother's drinking, I had to create a geographical boundary. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to create enough of an emotional boundary if I stayed in New York City, because I had tried that. 29 is a long time to be trying. So I knew it wasn't working. And, so that is really what drove me to want to move. And I had tried when I was 26, I tried to move out here, and it didn't stick. I just couldn't hang with it. I didn't have a car. I didn't know my way around. It was just me and my dog. I was in this tiny apartment. I did manage to put myself somewhere where I could kind of walk to some things, but it just I wasn't prepared enough, and I wasn't emotionally strong enough to stick it out. I stayed for a few months, and then I went back to New York. So when I decided at 29, okay, I'm doing it this time, I had intended to move alone, and I had certain things worked out ahead of time. I had an agent. This is when I was not sure. I was auditioning and pursuing acting, but also teaching. And I had come out to Los Angeles, and I'd done teacher trainings, and I knew the yoga community in Los Angeles was really vibrant, and I was definitely really excited about that. And one of the first things I did when I got here was sign up for a teacher training, even though I'd already done that. And this is back in the day when teacher trainings were kind of like a new thing. Now there are teacher trainings all over the place, but this is, again, over 20 years ago. And so there was a lot that was pulling me out this way after thinking my whole life I'll never live anywhere but New York City. I love New York City. I couldn't imagine living elsewhere until I came to Santa Monica, and I thought, well, this is pretty great. There's the ocean and the beach, and that felt like the best part of my childhood. The best part of my childhood happened on the Jersey Shore from the time I was born until I was 4. that is where we spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother and my aunt, my uncle, and my 4 cousins. So being near the beach is really soothing for me. And I'm actually like walking distance to the Santa Monica Pier, which feels very much to me like the Jersey Shore, amusement parks I used to go to when I was little. So it's not a coincidence that I ended up where I am. And at the time, there was this feeling in me of like, I know this is what I need to do. I just knew intuitively this was going to be good for me. And I had intended to do it by myself. And then I was writing about, plans, right? We have all these plans that we make, and then life has such a great way of kind of reminding us, like, most of the things that we plan are like, if they work out, there's definitely like some luck in there too. If things go exactly the way that you planned them, it's like some kind of kismet, because most of the time plans are, they can be upended so easily. And in my situation, I had planned to move in the middle of September 2001, and then September 11th happened. And it was so devastating and heartbreaking. And as a native New Yorker, like, there just was no way I could leave my city at that time. So that plan changed, and I pushed the move back to January, which meant I was dating this person a lot longer. I thought, well, and then I wasn't planning on dating anyone either, but then things happen, and I thought, okay, I've never just been light about a relationship, right? It's always been really heavy and intense. And, and maybe it would be really good for me to have the experience of just keeping it light, keeping it fun. I was thinking to myself at the time, it doesn't have to be this like pain and drama, and maybe it could just be like light and fun, and then I leave. Maybe that would be good for me. And my prior relationships had not been light or easy or lighthearted in any way. They'd been very intense and like heartbreaking, and a lot of pain. And part of that was I was trying to work through my own stuff, right? Like trying to figure out, coming out of the childhood that I experienced, a really low self-esteem. I certainly didn't even think about, when I entered a relationship, thinking about what I enjoyed or what lit me up, or this just wasn't even on my radar or on my mind. I was so focused on how can I help the other person, and how can I prevent myself from being left. I had a huge fear of abandonment. So a lot of things driving my relationships that were certainly not going to lead to anything fun or growing or exciting, or this just wasn't what was going to happen. But I didn't really understand that yet. I was trying to figure it out. So I thought, well, I'll have this like summer fun, and then I'll move to Los Angeles on my own. And then September 11th happened, and it's still hard to talk about. It was such a devastating experience to you just felt the grief everywhere for months. It was just the shock, the horror, all of it. And so I decided, okay, I'll go at the beginning of the year. And by that time, he then said, well, what if I went with you? And I do think that I knew I needed to go on my own. I think that I knew that somewhere, like, ooh, I shouldn't do this. But I was also really scared to move to a city where I literally did not know anyone, try to find a place to live, get myself set up with work. I had a very small little nest egg saved. Small, to get myself set up, and not a lot of time for mistakes. I was just going to have to like hit the ground running. And so the idea of doing that with someone else felt safer to me, felt less intimidating. And and he was great fun. I was having a good time, but I had seen some pretty serious warning signs, really, like, where if I had been in a different place, if I had been anywhere close to like how I am today, it would have been an absolute like, oh no, 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 no. I would have walked. So I just wasn't, that's not where I was. I was, 29. And so we moved and we came out here, and all of those red flags that I had felt, it was like red flag, it was a red flag festival, basically. Like, once we got out here, it was just kind of like one thing after another of really, and then I would do this thing where I'm like, wow, such a good person, and definitely like what's driving all of this stuff is pain, and if only I could help, if only I could save him, then it would be great. So I was still in that mindset, and that is what was happening. And there was something incredibly familiar to me about that. And there's also something incredibly familiar to me about being in a constant state of, heartache. I was used to that. And just because that feels like home doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's something you want to continue. That sense of longing and of sadness and of fear and of worry was so familiar to me that, I just thought, okay, this is like, this must be it, because this feels like everything I understand and know. And the sort of penultimate, red flag happened at Whole Foods, where I came around the corner and saw him slip a piece of cheese into his cargo pants. And I realized, and I said, did you just put cheese in your pant? And he's, denied it. And I reached into his pants and pulled out the cheese. And there was a lot of familiarity with that as well. So if you are someone who grew up in an alcoholic household, or you grew up in a household where your feelings were not respected or listened to, if you went through a lot of gaslighting, or even if it was just a thing of like, don't be sad, don't be scared, don't be angry, which happens in very loving households. That's when the grown-up in the situation finds it so difficult to watch their child suffering or struggling, that the only thing they can think of to do or say is like, don't feel that way. Don't be sad. I love you. Everything's okay. Life is great. Look at all these friends, just try to like talk the kid out of what they're feeling, instead of just normalizing, we all feel sad sometimes. We all feel scared sometimes. It's okay. Like, just let yourself feel this. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. This feeling will, it will come. It will like peak, and then it will subside, and you'll have a different feeling. Just let yourself feel this feeling. If that's not the environment that you grew up in, and most of us didn't, it's like you may really find yourself in situations where being gaslit feels like home. And so in my childhood, the person that, my mother, I loved my mother. I've talked about this every week for as long as we've been doing this. I loved my mother like fiercely. Like I loved her so much, and we struggled because of her alcoholism, and she would not admit that she had a problem. She would not get help. She wouldn't even have that kind of a conversation. My mother was, and it really breaks my heart now, because she passed away at the very end of 2021, in December of 2021. And we did finally, the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks of her life, when she was literally on her deathbed, we did finally, she finally understood that I had loved her every minute of my entire life, and the problem between us was the drinking. Up until the last 2 or 3 weeks of her life, we just struggled because she would not admit that she had a problem. She wouldn't, she just wouldn't look at it, wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't talk to me about why she became so enraged with me when she drank. Like, she wouldn't go there. She wouldn't go to therapy. She wouldn't, she just wasn't open to that kind of those resources. She didn't like to sweat, so she wouldn't come to yoga. Like, there was nothing along those lines that she was willing to explore. And so it made it really difficult to be close, because when you can't have real conversations with someone, when you can't say, I'm hurting, like, the drinking is so painful for me to be around. I can't be around you when you're drinking. Can we please talk about it? And the person is saying to you, there's nothing wrong with my drinking. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. You're too sensitive. You're dramatic, and these are the words I was labeled with as a kid growing up. And so what happens is you come out of an environment like that and you really don't trust yourself. If all the adults, and this does happen, and by the way, I'm using this term alcoholic, I just want to be really clear. Like, someone who's an alcoholic or an addict is in pain. They're numbing the pain. And if somebody needs to numb their pain to that degree every day, they're in a lot of pain. So I'm not using that term without empathy or compassion or anything else. However, at a certain point, if you are hurting all the people around you, you got to take a look at what's happening, right? Like, this is what happens when you refuse to look at your stuff, is then everybody else pays the price. And in the alcoholic system, what tends to happen in that family system is that the alcoholic will surround themselves with enablers. So there's the family, and you're there in the house. It's not like you chose to be there. You're there. And then there are all the friends around the alcoholic. And in my mother's case, it's what happened. It's usually people who love to drink are going to want to be around other people who love to drink, and nobody wants to call anybody else out on how much they're drinking. And so I was kind of the lone voice in the situation, saying this really, as I got older. When I was a kid, I didn't even know that there was a connection between her behavior and the alcohol. Like, how would you know that, right? Like, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I had no idea that when people drank alcohol, it changed the way they felt and behaved and spoke. And, I didn't have any experience with that. So I didn't really realize till I was 12 or 13 that the alcohol is the thing that was changing her behavior. Prior to that, I thought it was me. She would get really, just furious, and it would scare me. She would come after me. It would scare me. And this is a woman I adored in every sense. All I wanted was for her to love me. Like, that's all I wanted. I wanted her affection, her praise, and she was not a hugger, and she was not one to give a lot of verbal praise. So I just wasn't getting that. I was so hungry for her to love me, and she did love me, but I didn't realize that till way later. Again, you're just a kid. You're trying to make sense of what you're experiencing. And so I thought it was me. And then as I got older, I did know, like, oh, she's got a drinking problem. That's what's going on here. She's a serious drinking problem. And why isn't anyone else who loves her, like, doing anything? So that's when I started to speak up and say, like, Mom, like, I'm scared for you. Like, you're not okay, and she would, that was absolutely unacceptable. I was not allowed to try to have that kind of conversation with her. And when I went to her friends, they would tell me, your mom's a social drinker. It's not a problem. You're very sensitive and dramatic. And this is how the whole, all that whole crew of people, this is like what I was being told. And these are the people that we spent, all the time with. Like, they were around the house all the time, or the weekend house, whatever. This is the crew that I grew up with, everyone telling me, I'm like, I don't know, like I think something's wrong, and everyone telling me nothing's wrong, it's your perception. So when you come out of that experience on top of the never knowing whether it's going to be okay or not. My mother was a very successful, put together. I mean, she always looked, she was always done. Makeup, hair, jewelry. She smelled good. The outfit was, she did not own sweats. She really didn't even own jeans. She was just very done. And the drinking would start at 5, and then sometimes it would sneak up and be a little bit earlier in the day, but usually the Chardonnay came out at 5, and it didn't go away until she went to bed. And some nights it wouldn't get ugly, and many nights it would, and you never knew. I never knew. And so when you come out of that kind of situation, and I haven't even like touched on my dad's house, and that was like a whole other, host of secrets and fear and anxiety because of all the women. My dad was a, very enthusiastic womanizer. I'm always searching for the correct adjective. He was a shockingly incredible womanizer, and I don't mean that in a good way. And so at his house, I was always on high alert when the phone rang, because if a woman called the house and my stepmom answered, that was the end of the night. She would lock herself in the bathroom, and you could hear her sobbing through the whole house for hours. It was awful. And I loved her. So, I would run to answer the phone. My dad had taught me, like, do not say who it is. Just say it's, Dad, you have a call. Don't say, Dad, Barbara's calling. Like, don't do that. I mean, it was like, so there's a lot of, and my dad he had a flash temper. So it was just a lot of that going on, where I just never knew where the explosion was going to happen and kind of how to keep myself safe. And I learned how to like try to be invisible, or try to be perfect, or try to be helpful, or try to be, to placate, or to all the things, just to try to keep everybody okay and keep myself safe. That was kind of like the experience I had growing up. So I come around the corner at Whole Foods. I see this happen with my own eyes. I walk up. I say to him, do you have cheese in your pants? And he says, no. Like, are you crazy? And I really wasn't sure. I was really like, maybe I didn't see that. Maybe I imagined that or something. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. Maybe he picked up the cheese and put it in the cart. I reached my hand into his cargo pants, and sure enough, there's a giant piece of wrapped Parmesan. And, and then the rest of it unraveled, where he said, what are you doing? And I was like, what am I doing? What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm evening the score. The prices here are crazy. I'm like, okay, but we're choosing to shop here. So you don't get to even the score. The choice you have is to not shop here. You don't get to decide that the prices are so high at Whole Foods, you're just going to steal some cheese to make up for it. Like that's not one of the options. So, he said, okay, whatever. And we go to the checkout line, and, but I'm running it over in my head. And this is also part of that, the repercussions of not trusting yourself, is that you're like constantly questioning whether what you think does this seem okay to you? Like, and I used to have those conversations with my friends all the time. The trusted people in my life, it was a constant like, is it me, or does this seem, X, Y, or Z? Because I did not trust my own judgment and my own perception. I had been trained not to trust that. And I was at the moment in my personal journey, healing journey, where I was really trying to rewire that. I had recognized that was an issue, and I was trying to figure out, how do I start to trust myself and trust my own judgment and trust my perception? Because I feel like I'm pretty right on most of the time. Like, if I'm feeling something is off, it's off. So why am I not trusting myself? And I had started with the most basic stuff where it was like when I would be on my mat, for example, and I'd be in Warrior 2, and I would say to myself, okay, I want to be in a 90-degree bend as long as my body says yes to that. I want to be in a 90-degree bend with my front leg. I feel like I'm in a 90-degree bend. Now let me check and see if I'm in a 90-degree bend. And I would put my hands on my own body and sometimes look down or sometimes work with a mirror. I'm not a fan of mirrors in yoga, but at that time in my practice, sometimes it was helpful for me to look and make sure that what I thought was happening is what was actually happening. That is how basic I had to get with learning how to trust myself. And so that's where I was at this moment in time. And I didn't write about that in the essay, but that's where I was. I was really trying to start to not question it if I had a feeling. And that might seem weird for people, but it is also and not everybody's a child of an alcoholic. Everybody's got different things that they're dealing with, but that's a very typical thing when you're just taught to kind of push your feelings down. And it isn't just an alcoholic household. It's like if you were in an environment where you were supposed to be seen and not heard, it's another form of push your feelings down and act right. So I really felt cut off from my feelings a lot of the time. And this was something that was in my awareness that I was working on. So here we are. So now I'm leaving Whole Foods and we're putting this stuff in the car, but I'm just replaying it. And I could see it. It was like I was playing a tape. I could see him just slipping the cheese in the pan, slipping the cheese. I could just see it. And we got in the car and I was like, that was not the first time you did that, was it? And he said, oh no, I've been doing that for years. And I've been doing that since I was 18. He was 34 at the time. And I just could not, it was like, when everything starts spinning, because I really thought, oh man, the ground just went out from under me. And so I started replaying things, and I recalled a time that we were at Banana Republic, and he brought a sweater to the register, and there was a sale tag on it, and the woman was like, oh, this is strange, this isn't on sale, this is from our new line, where did you find this? And he was like, well, I just found it over there, whatever. And it's the law that you have to give somebody an item for whatever it's marked, whatever it says on the tag, you can't, there's something. So she had to give it to him. But she seemed a little bit how, it didn't seem like a normal, but I was like, oh, I don't know, and for me, I'm the kind of person, I would have been whatever the full price is, then let's just pay it. But he was not, he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not how it was marked. He's very so I asked him, I'm like, was that thing? And he's like, yeah, I switch tags sometimes. So he had a whole system of evening the score that was happening all the time. And this is a human being with his own stuff, and his own pain, and actually his own alcoholic parent who was distant and, never got that approval. So I understood that, and nothing that I'm not sharing any identifying characteristics or anything. He's a good person who just didn't deal with his stuff. And this is what I'm talking about. When you don't heal those things that are in your way, they're going to come out in other ways, and it isn't going to be pretty. So by the time we got back to the house, I had said to him, I can't live with you. You're going to have to move in with our friend, and if you will get therapy and get help, I'll stick it out with you, but I'm not signing up for this. And by the way, it's as a yoga teacher also, there's ahimsa, non-harming, asteya, non-stealing. It's right there, the yamas and niyamas, it's right up top, and it shouldn't need to be said. I mean, non-stealing, usually in the yogic sense, it's there's an assumption that we all know you don't take something that you haven't paid for that doesn't belong to you. Like that's pretty basic stuff there, right? The deeper version of non-stealing is like, are you chronically late? So are people waiting for you for 15 minutes at restaurants a lot of the time? Or, like, are you stealing people's time, or are you stealing people's energy? Like there's an assumption that if you're practicing yoga, hopefully you already know, and you've known for a very long time, like since you were tiny, that you don't take things that you don't pay for. So, and he said, I said to him, well, what about even that? And he was like, well, I like the dichotomy. I like the dichotomy of being like a yoga teacher who, like, okay, well, I do not like that. And it was just a hard line. Like there wasn't any, he wasn't willing to get help, and I wasn't certainly willing to just live with someone who was going to be, doing that. And again, I like really don't say this without compassion. There's dis-ease going on there if someone is doing that. There's a real deep pain happening if someone is doing that regularly and they need some help. So I just wasn't going to live in a house with someone who was like, yeah, this is how I am, and this is what I do, and this is how it is. I'm like, well, then we're done, And I was really devastated because I was really invested, I really deeply cared and like thought I was going to be able to save him, and realized like I'm not going to be able to save him. And oh, wow, just got the download, like I'm not going to be able to save anybody who doesn't want to save themselves. Like all you can ever do for anyone is love them and offer them the tools that maybe have worked for you. I used to always say you can buy people a yoga mat, you can do that. You can say, hey, this has really helped me in my life. Or, hey, I have a therapist I think, has been so amazing for me. Like you can do that, but you cannot do the inside work for someone. That's Sylvia Boorstein is an amazing meditation teacher and writer. And she has a book called Happiness is an Inside Job. And that's the facts right there. Happiness is an inside job. You've got to, each one of us has to like get in there and figure out what is getting in my way here. If I am not happy, if there's some part of me that like questions whether I'm lovable, or doesn't trust my gut, or doesn't trust my own perception, or walks by red flags. Like I just walked by, an apple. Like I better stop and figure this out and get right with myself, because it's a long life. It's a short life and it's a long life, right? It's a long life inside yourself and with that voice in your head. And it's a long life if you're allowing yourself to be mistreated, if you have no idea what lights you up, if you have no idea what inspires you or what compels you. If you don't know yourself, Svadhyaya, there's a little more yoga for you, self-study. If you don't know who you are and what is driving you, what's scaring you, what's blocking you, you're not going to be able to show up in the world with the best you have to offer, and you're not going to be able to receive the best the world has to offer. And that's the truth. You're just not going to be open in that way. And to me, healing and kind of like rewiring your system when you need to is it's not optional. It's like, that's your responsibility here, because we need everyone operating like at their highest level as much of the time as possible. And we do not have that. It's pretty clear when you look around, that's not what is going on. Even just as you walk along the streets, you'll see people, I don't know, just like taking up space and not even realizing they're taking up space. Like they're just taking up the whole sidewalk because they've decided this whole sidewalk is theirs. There's no awareness of like, wait a second, I'm in a big world, there's a lot of people, and I have to know how to share the space. That's just like gone. There's a lot of that going on, and the more people could, that we can, that stop and decide, wait a minute, I want to be like accountable for the energy that I'm spreading. And that means I have to really take a look at this world that's happening within me and figure out, what I need to do in order to not be plagued by self-doubt or feelings of being not enough. Like, what do I need to look at? When did I start believing those things about myself? What happened that made me start to feel that way, to feel like I couldn't trust anyone, or everyone leaves, or everyone cheats? I mean, these were things that like narratives I had, stories I told myself for a long time when I went out into the world, because everyone cheats. My dad, right? Like, and everyone leaves. And I mean, there's a lot of thoughts that I had that turned out not to be true, that needed to really be looked at. And it's not overnight work, And so I think a lot of people are just like, oh, like, I just want to like have a glass of wine and like watch Netflix and relax. Like, I don't want to like do this work. But the thing is that like that work is what leads to, liberation from this really old stuff that, is probably getting in your way if you haven't stopped to figure it out. And to me, healing is it's not this state where you're never triggered again, or like these old tendencies don't try to like rear their, complicated heads here. It's not that. It's that ultimately, right, you have tools to deal with it when self-sabotaging ideas or behaviors start to arise. You have the tools to notice and to make a different choice. And so to me, healing is that state when whatever may have happened in your past is not driving your current decision-making process or behavior. So these things may have happened. You may get waves of sadness or grief, or you might mourn like lost time or wish things could have been a different way. All those things may happen, but you're not in a situation where today, this moment, your decisions or your behavior is ruled by something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's to me is healed. That's healing, right? And when you head into a relationship, you're very aware of, what it is that is important to you, what's meaningful to you. I had to do a lot of work to figure out, like, even how I felt. Like what I was talking about earlier about putting my hands on my own body to see, I think I'm in a 90-degree bend. Am I in a 90-degree bend? I had to really get, I just started the lowest level to teach myself to say, yeah, I can trust myself. Like what I feel is happening is what is happening. That's solid. Now, we're always walking into situations and we have all these experiences that we're bringing with us, that frame of reference, which I like to think of almost like glasses, like a frame, that you're putting on. And as you're moving through the world, everything's coming through those glasses, that frame of reference that you're carrying with you everywhere. So whatever ideas you have about yourself and other people and the world at large, it's not like you check that stuff at the door. You walk right into the party thinking whatever those things are, unless you've done that work to kind of clear the lenses or sometimes get a whole new frame. And so I'm at such a different place in my life now. The story I was writing about yesterday happened, I was 29, I'm 52, a lot of life has happened in between that experience and where I am today. When I met my husband, I met him in 2016. I was in a whole different state of mind about all of it. I didn't think I'd ever get married again. I had my kids. I love my kids to the ends of this earth. I have work that I love. And so that wasn't even on my list of things. I just was, I wanted to find someone that was gonna that I could share time with and experiences and conversation, like good conversation, interesting conversation. I wanted someone really like with something interesting to say, and I wanted affection and love, or I didn't want anything. Like that's kind of where I was at. Like I either want something amazing that's going to up the joy quotient in my life, or I'm not interested. Like that's really where I was in my life when I met him. And that's a whole different way of approaching a relationship, certainly than, I had in my 20s and even in my early 30s. This is not how I was walking into relationships. I was still had that ingrained, like, how can I help? This person looks like they need some saving. I'm ready. Like that is still what was going on with me. It took me a long time to really rewire my system and realize like that leads to heartbreak 100% of the time. You want to do a scientific experiment, 100% of the time that leads to heartbreak. So maybe it would be great to try something different. And, I can tell you it has been really great to try something different. And it is liberating. And that is my point, is whatever your stuff is, maybe for you, if you're getting to know someone and there's a red flag, you're already at the point of like, I pay attention, right? If I see a red flag, I stop. I might not be done, but I'm certainly on alert. And if I see another red flag, I'm out. Like you might already be in that place. Or you might not. You might have other things that go on where you are like plagued by just feeling not enough in any number of multiple ways. This culture will tell us, we're not measuring up. Maybe you're plagued by that. A lot of people are. You're not alone. Whatever it is for you, it's just the greatest gift you can give yourself is to like look at it and figure it out and work through it. And even if it takes, a really long time and a lot of dedication, I could just tell you what is more important to invest in than your own like freedom, than your own ability to say, yeah, a lot of things happened, in my childhood that were painful and difficult. And I can look back and have a lot of compassion for that, like 4-year-old version of me who's still in here somewhere, or 5-year-old or 8-year-old, or, 13-year-old, like, hello, like 36-year-old, like I can still, I have a lot of compassion for every version of myself I've ever been, but I don't want to be ruled by that stuff. Do you? Do you want to be ruled by things that happened like before you had any agency to make choices? Because I don't. And you don't have to be. You don't have to be. That's the good news. And so I hope that this has been helpful and, giving you some food for thought just to kind of consider, is there anything that's getting in my way? Like, is there anything I'm believing about myself that might not be true? Are there tendencies that I have that are kind of preventing me from really experiencing joy and love? Just to really, there's stories, narratives I have going that are maybe really old or were never true to begin with. Like, just to take a nice assessment of kind of like where you are, and then start to just get to work, but get to work kindly. The best place for me, the two things that have been, well, probably like the three things that have been the most helpful. Therapy, for what my experience has been over the years, is it's great for identifying, the issues, right? Great for being able to articulate, okay, here's the thing that's happening for me. It's a pattern. In yoga, we call them samskaras. It's a pattern. I can see, like when I look back, I do this thing again and again. I want to get to the root of it, right? And just in doing that alone, just in kind of bringing this stuff to the surface, you take the power away from it, right? It's like naming the monster under the bed, right? Like you take the power away from it and then you can start to work with it. And so therapy is really great for identifying like what the issues might be. Yoga for me, really great for moving through that stuff. Getting on my mat and just saying, okay, no matter what happens today, whether I'm full of energy or I'm tired, whether I'm really open and strong or I'm feeling tight, like whatever it is, whether I have all the balance in the world or like I'm falling a little, whatever it is, I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm going to meet myself where I am from day to day with compassion and patience and understanding and respect. I'm going to respect my body. I'm not going to try to like own it or crush it or demand, I'm not doing that. I'm going to actually give my body the respect it deserves and the gratitude it deserves and try to be in a loving partnership with my own body. Since I live in here, it would be nice to be friends with my body, to be an advocate for my own body, to, maybe let my body give me some information once in a while instead of telling it what to do all the time. So those are things that I figured out on my mat. Like that was really helpful for me to step onto my mat and just say, I am going to cultivate self-compassion, patience, kindness, hopefully a sense of humor about myself instead of this type A perfectionist, thing I've been doing for so long that feels awful. I'm always disappointed in myself. I can never live up to those expectations. This is not working. I'm going to do something different. And those were two really helpful things. And then writing for me. Writing is another way of understanding myself, the world, just humans generally and why we do the things we do. And I love that stuff. I love it. I'm fascinated by, I love human beings, humanity. I mean, there are certain people who are really challenging, but generally speaking, right? Who is it that says that? Like, I don't know, there's somebody that has some comment about like, I love humanity, don't like people or something. I like most people. We all have difficult people in our lives. Anyway, I hope this has been useful to you. If you have any questions or comments, I'm always available. I'm always happy to revisit a topic, or if there's something on your mind that might work for next week's topic, I'm always available and open for that. And I just really appreciate getting to spend this time with you. Thank you for being here and being open to this kind of conversation. It really does mean the world to me.